The Industrial Revolution propelled humanity into all the luxuries we have today, and fossil fuels are what accelerated that process. However, with that came the introduction of air, water, and ground pollution. In recent decades, there has been a push to create energy from renewable sources. But is this the answer? Or is it more complicated than it seems? Let's find out. In the 1750s, the Industrial Revolution marked a significant turning point in history, as it was characterized by the transition from hand production methods to machines, new chemical manufacturing, improved efficiency of water power, the increasing use of steam power, and the development of machine tools. The revolution began in Great Britain and soon spread to other parts of the world, including Europe, North America, and eventually the globe. The one thing that triggered its advancement was the widespread use of fossil fuels. Coal was the first to be used to produce steam power used for factories, boats, and trains. In the later half of the 19th century and the early 20th century, oil began being used for fuel, especially for some of the early combustion engine vehicles. The distillation of petroleum to produce kerosene and gasoline became increasingly sophisticated in the early 20th century. The use of petroleum rapidly became available to fuel engines for transportation, industry, and later electricity generation. Later, natural gas, another fossil fuel, began being used for electricity generation, and by the 1970s, natural gas became increasingly important as a source of power generation, driven by its abundance, relatively low cost, and cleaner burning properties compared to coal and oil. Today, coal, oil, and natural gas are still widely used, but in the 21st century society, there has been considerable debate on their contributions to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, leading to more nations adopting renewable energy sources for power generation. But is a fully renewable world possible? In this week's episode, we're going to try to answer that. First, we'll look at all the major types of renewable energy resources and their positives and negatives. Then later, we'll discuss if using exclusively renewables is practical or if it's not. But before we begin, if you like geography and earth science related content, you found the right channel. So be sure to subscribe to my channel, Our World, Our Planet, Our Home. Let's get started. Worldwide, nearly 30% of power comes from renewable energy sources. The top three are hydroelectricity at 17%, wind at 6.2%, and solar at 3.3%. Hydroelectricity uses the flow of water from rivers, streams, or dams to generate electricity. It is one of the oldest and most established forms of renewable energy, which is why many nations use it for a power source. In fact, many developing countries in Africa get most of their power from hydroelectricity, including Ethiopia and Uganda. There are a couple of reasons associated with why. For one, nations within Africa have immense amounts of water resources thanks to their physical geography, allowing nations there to take advantage of it for power generation. And once a hydroelectric complex is constructed, the project requires relatively low maintenance and operation cost compared to fossil fuel-powered energy plants. But there are downsides. While renewable energy sources are supposed to be clean, hydroelectricity has some negative environmental implications. For one, the construction of large dams can have significant environmental impacts, including habitat destruction for fish and wildlife, altered river flow, and the displacement of local communities. Also, although hydroelectric plants produce no direct emissions, reservoirs in tropical regions can emit methane, a potent greenhouse gas, due to the decomposition of flooded vegetation. Another potential negative is climatic changes. Hydroelectric power generation is dependent on water availability, which can be affected by droughts, reducing the power supply when it may be needed the most. Unfortunately, Africa is at risk of frequent droughts, which can impact hydroelectric power. Wind power uses the wind's kinetic energy to generate electricity. It's one of the fastest growing renewable energy technologies and can be deployed on both the small scale and large scale. Many Central and Northern European nations utilize wind power, with Denmark having the highest percentage generated at 55%. In the US, Texas has invested in wind farms and generates the most power from it of any state. Wind is a natural force which is usually continuous even on fair weather days, and the areas where many wind farms are constructed have higher than average wind speed values. Once wind turbines are installed, the operational costs are relatively low compared to conventional power plants, as wind power does not require any fuel. Although wind power is clean, the power generating capacities for it are limited. To get adequate amounts of power, large wind farms must be constructed, and this leads to demands for land, thus creating certain ecological problems. One connected to that is the impact on wildlife. Wind turbines can pose a threat to birds and bats, leading to concerns about impacts on biodiversity. However, careful site selection and technological improvements are helping to mitigate these effects. Another negative of wind power is location. Many wind farms are built in isolated remote locations where wind speeds are maximized, but these areas are usually far away from urban centers, requiring investment in transmission lines to transport electricity. Solar power involves capturing the sun's energy using solar panels and converting it into electricity for residential, commercial, and industrial use. Namibia, a desert nation in southwestern Africa, produces the most solar power by percentage at 24.2%. In fact, many desert nations and areas utilize solar power because of the high sunshine hours throughout the year. The sun produces infinite amounts of power, making solar power the most reliable energy source. Besides solar farms producing power, homeowners can invest in solar power by putting photovoltaic systems on roofs, making the homeowner power independent. But there are some limitations. For one, the initial cost of purchasing a solar system is fairly high. This includes paying for the solar panels, inverters, batteries, wiring, and the installation. Meteorological conditions can deter solar power, in that areas that have frequent cloudiness and low sunshine hours will not benefit fully from it. This is especially true within high latitude areas which receive low sunshine hours during the winter months, along usually with cloudiness. Although pollution related to solar energy systems is far less compared to other power sources, solar energy can be linked to it. Transportation and installation of solar systems have been associated with the emission of greenhouse gases. There are also some toxic and hazardous materials used during the manufacturing process of solar panels which can indirectly affect the environment. So, are renewable energy sources the future of power generation? And can all of the Earth be powered exclusively by it? It's complicated. As of now, it's still not possible to have a fully renewable world. There are over 8 billion people on Earth, and this figure is still increasing. With more people comes more need for power supplies. Much of the population growth currently occurring is in poor developing nations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. While some of these nations have much of their power coming from renewable sources such as hydroelectricity, many of them still have majority fossil fuel power grids. And although power grids may be electrified by renewables, others are still not, including much of the transportation sector. As of today, only 2.2% of vehicles on the road are electric worldwide. Initially, electric vehicles were seen as something that would gain traction. However, there has been some backtracking to this with concerns such as range, performance in cold weather, practicality, and price. Until these issues are addressed, a transition to a fully electric market will be rather slow. In terms of power generation, it seems that hydroelectricity is the most reliable and efficient renewable thanks to its reliability and practicality. Many nations around the world get a majority of their power from it, which shows its capabilities compared to wind and solar power sources, which do have many constraints. However, out of the renewable energy sources, hydroelectricity contributes to the most environmental issues, with damages to ecosystems and contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. One power source that is being shunned but can create clean, efficient power is nuclear. The Chernobyl and Fukushima nuclear accidents are two primary reasons why nations are reluctant to use it as a power source. However, it's incredibly safe when compared to other power sources. Also, nuclear power can be recycled through a process known as nuclear fuel reprocessing. This involves treating spent nuclear fuel to separate usable fissile material from waste products, allowing the recovered materials to be reused as fuel in nuclear reactors. Currently, France, who receives 68.4% of their power from nuclear, recycles it. But other nations don't, so there are some technical obstacles. The fact of the matter is, whatever way you look at it, there is no perfect solution that will satisfy our power needs and the populace. Each power source has its positives and negatives and limitations. The best thing to do in the year 2024 is to use all power sources available, renewable and non-renewable. However, it's probably best to get away from highly polluting ones such as coal. A proactive combination of nuclear, natural gas, and hydroelectricity is the best bet for having a well-secured future for power generation. And renewables such as solar, wind, geothermal, wave, and tidal powers can be utilized where conditions are feasible. In terms of transportation, while electric vehicles serve a purpose, very fuel-efficient gasoline-powered cars and hybrids are currently more practical and sensible to drive and less expensive. Perhaps in the far future, hundreds of years down the road, the world can be completely carbon neutral. It has to be a slow and well thought out transition to that. What's your opinion on the matter? I'd love to hear what you have to say, so please leave your feedback in the comments section below. Thank you again for watching this video. If you enjoy geography and earth science related content, be sure to subscribe to my channel, Our World, Our Planet, Our Home. Until next time!